Yeah, I can't hear you just yet. It
How
says
about
you're
now?
connected to audio though. Let's
Anything?
see if we can
Anything?
fix that. I'm not sure if that's a me thing or a you thing. If you may need to change your audio to calling in, but it looks
Uh,
like you are calling in.
I am calling in.
We'll be starting in just a minute. For all of you that are with us today, I want to welcome all of you. Good afternoon and welcome to this month's Green Room. Free yourself from negativity, providing positive feedback in corrective coaching. So to start for today, I had hoped that I might be able to just provide a brief introduction and then head right into it. You all know me quite well at this point. Perhaps what you don't know about me, though, is that I'm also a mystery shopper and I am a performance coach. So, what that means is I'm really good at telling people how ugly their baby is. And I'm also really good at making people cry. And I say that jokingly. I do often have to give very bad news. I have to tell general managers things that perhaps they don't necessarily want to know about, or things that they do know about, but they know that they don't want to address it. And I have to sometimes share with staff members things that are more obvious about their performance that perhaps they would rather I didn't talk with them about. Um, what I have found, though, are some really key things to coaching that have helped me and served me very well. And I want to be able to share those with you today and perhaps refresh your memory as it relates to some that you do already know. So let's get right into it and start with maybe asking some questions. So if you have microphones on and you have a story that you want to share, I want to hear it. So tell me about a time, or think of a time, and tell me what happened the last time you shared positive feedback. So, how did you know that it was well received, or was there a story about kind of how it happened? So, if you have a story you'd like to share, you're welcome to raise your hand, or just mics are all on right now, so you should be good to go and just shout it out and tell us. So I can tell you about the last time I shared positive feedback with somebody. In the meantime, it was just last week. And after every strategic vacation sales training event, usually what I do is I spend an entire day conducting one-on-one coaching sessions with staff members. Yes, I did have a crier that day. It wasn't my fault. I swear it wasn't my fault. What happened, though, was that we had this opportunity to really get honest about feedback, and I was able to share with her the things that I had heard that had been going quite well in reservation sales calls. And I was quick to share that information with her as well. She wasn't waiting a long time to hear that information from me. So I think she really appreciated that. And she said to me, I wish my manager would share this information with me more often. So that made me think a little bit about how important positive feedback is, and why perhaps sometimes we don't give positive feedback as much as we could or should. Now, conversely, what happened the last time you shared negative feedback? Did you have a crier? Maybe it was even uglier than that, where there was some raised voices or some hot tempers about the whole situation. Maybe you ended up in a all-out fight and HR had to get involved. So negative feedback is not something that most people like. In fact, sometimes people consider the F word really to be feedback. So when I say that, I think of it sort of in a interesting way as to why. Why is that we're all so averse to feedback? Well, this was kind of an interesting study that I researched. People who receive feedback are going to apply it only 30% of the time. Take a second to text chat to me if you can, why you might think that could be. Why do you think people who receive feedback are going to apply it only 30% of the time? So I see some of you are saying things like it's because they perhaps don't trust the person that's giving them the feedback. Other reasons might be that it's not given at a good time where either your mindset or the staff member's mindset are not in the right place. Other times, the other reasons why feedback is only applied 30% of the time is sometimes people just say, I just don't care to get better at this. What is the reason for me to improve upon my vacuuming skills, for example? So there are quite a few reasons why. So if you didn't have one that you shared, consider that there are reasons. The number one reason though why is the number one reason why people only apply it 30% of the time is because they already think that they're doing a good job. And when we as leaders come out of the blue and suddenly provide corrective coaching, that's not taken as seriously because there has been so much time that has gone by where I was doing everything right, or you weren't saying anything about my performance at all. So I can only assume that I was doing things right. So that one time now that you tell me that I wasn't doing things correctly, I'm now looking at that quite differently as not so much positive feedback, but actually as criticism. And I'm going to be very defensive about that criticism. If your staff doesn't know, they never grow, whether or not they choose to stay. And I think this is so important for us to remember. Whether or not they choose to stay, we owe it to our staff members to invest in them. And the idea of tacit approval, which creates that negativity, can become really a cancer in your organization. So I want to give you some elements of impressions and get you thinking about maybe what you bring to the table as a coach, as a leader, give you some suggestions for keywords at key times in coaching so that we're reframing the things that we're saying in a way that can be well received. Also, giving you some tips for how to deal with defensiveness in our staff, and also tips for sharing the negative in an actually positive way. So hopefully this is up your alley today. And again, feel free to chime in. If you have something that you'd like to share, I want to hear from you. I want you to raise your hands. I want you to get involved and have conversations with us today. And I'll keep asking questions of all of you too, so that you're thinking about some of these important things that we're addressing here. Use your text chat, use your microphone. So back to that F word, feedback. So usually feedback is a two-way street. So I give you some information and then you give me information, or vice versa. And sometimes we forget that. We forget that it is a two-way street, and it's something that we need to be having an actual conversation about. So how much should you be conducting praise coaching? How much? My rule of thumb to you is that for every one time that you provide corrective coaching to your staff, you should be providing 5 praise coaches. So be honest with yourself and think about even today. How many times have you shared positive feedback with a staff member today? If you haven't filled up that bank with a lot of positive transactions, when you have to pull money out of that bank, it's not going to be there. Yep, catch my drift? So build it up. build up the positive feedback, and then you'll have a higher likelihood that your staff will be receptive whenever you in fact do need to give them that feedback. The trust is built that you have their overall development in mind, and not that you're just trying to get them to stay in a lane or do what you want them to do. So think about this as well. You remember, even just last month, we were talking about praise coaching and how you give magical coaching. And magical coaching, for those of you that perhaps don't remember, it's an acronym for the type of coaching that it needs to be. And I won't go through this with you again because we did it last month, but I encourage you to go back to June's webinar if you're not familiar with it. But it's it's the contents that should come into an effective coaching session, praise or corrective. So M for meaning, alignment, G, growth, I, information, and C is context. So that way, let's get back there. Sorry, I just got a little nutty there. Yes, meaning, alignment, growth, information, and context. So these components need to be included in every bit of coaching that you do. So nice job is not coaching. Nice job is encouragement, just not coaching. So remember that 5-to-1. You have to provide 5 praise coaches for every 1 corrective coach. So when you are giving that praise coaching, some tips to remember. First of all, whenever you're finding it, be specific and timely and clear. And my advice to you would be to specifically mention the moment when you saw, or the moment when you heard, or the moment when you learned something. So at 2:00 today, I was talking with the director of food and beverage about that event that we had last night. And he said that you were so efficient and you were the hero of the night. He said that whenever we had to turn over the room, that you were the first there. And he also said that you were such a team player when Tom cut his finger and had to get it bandaged. I'm just so grateful for that. And thank you. Be immediate. When you see it, say it. Share how that performance affects other people. So when I'm telling people how not only this is going to help them to grow, but also the impact that it had on other people, they're going to feel more trusting of you, and that it's not just about you. Deliver it sincerely. And remember, if it's a red communicator, yellow, green, or blue, they're going to receive your feedback a little bit differently. So this construct of any magical coaching, I think, is probably the best advice for you. So it's something like, David, you are organized. The reason I say that is whenever I ask you for a report, you always have everything that I'm looking for. And I'm just so impressed at how well you're able to keep us all straight. What I love about it too is that you have just become so indispensable to this team. Thank you very much. Or I feel when you, and this shows, so I feel so comfortable when you're working on a project with me. And that to me shows me how valuable you are to this team. Thank you. So that's pretty simple, right? But then what happens when we have to provide that negative feedback? Well, we're going to have to look at it a little differently and say, next time, let's do this, that, or the other thing. And we may have to have some conversations about that. So start first with thinking about you. So when the good times go bad, is it them or is it you? When corrective coaching perhaps isn't being received very well. When you've had a staff member who you have said repeatedly, you need to shorten your call times. You need to turn your tables faster. Is it you or is it them? So let's start with what you can actually control in that situation. You're able to control you personally. Your overall likability as a person is determined by 55% your nonverbals, 38% your tone of voice, and 7% is the words that you use. So I decide whether or not I like you based on these three components. So what that means is, notice how the words, it's really not about the words. It's about your tone of voice and it's about your nonverbals. So I'll show you some examples here. Here. So here's a great example of a woman who is pointing at another woman, and it looks like this is in a food and beverage environment. So automatically, this body language is going to create defensiveness. This is saying, you messed up. You did something wrong. This is on you. So that body language, she has control over the body language that she chooses in that moment. Unfortunately, this the person in the chef's jacket also has a choice that they can be making. So we don't mean to be coming off, if we're for the blue shirt lady, we don't mean to be looking that way, but sometimes that's just enough to turn somebody off or shut them down. There are other more subtle things, though, that we maybe don't pick up on whenever we are conducting corrective coaching. And if we did pick up on them, I think that we would be able to see the signs, perhaps, of a staff member that is not comfortable a lot faster. So here are some examples. This person is perhaps holding their ring finger. They're taking a look at, or they're kind of playing with their ring finger. This means that this person wants attention, and we're not giving them the attention that they're looking for. This is another one. So during coaching, if somebody's doing this, they're saying, I'm out of here. I don't want to talk about it anymore. This is a determined position, and this could actually stem from insecurity. So if you see a staff member doing this, or if you notice that you're doing this yourself, be aware of that. I'm looking for incongruency there. Buttoning a jacket as well. That means I'm feeling uncomfortable. So this typically has to do with someone who's feeling overwhelmed. They're going to button up a jacket so that they feel like they have more comfort over the situation. What we also have, here's another example. If someone is kind of putting their fingers on their nose, they're saying, I don't believe this information. I find this a little suspicious. So sometimes that's enough for, if you're doing that, for a staff member to not believe what you're actually saying. And looking at a watch, what this will typically denote to somebody is that you don't have any time, that you need to leave. And that can be a real turnoff for somebody. So be aware of how body language perhaps is contributing to the message that you are trying to communicate to somebody. We sometimes say a lot more than we think we're saying. So what should you do instead? Here's some more welcoming body language. There's also, this is a position of willingness or agreement of a conversation. And this is going to make someone feel more comfortable about agreeing with your feedback if you can have that posture. This is another one that says, I'm comfortable and I'm sure of myself. Another one here, open arms, I have nothing to hide. So when you're communicating, that's a better look for you. Here's another one, just this picture here, a staff member that's coaching the chefs and the server, and they're all standing together. This is more of an adversarial kind of maybe an instructional posture, but it still does work depending on the situation. You want to be noticing the body language of the recipients of your message. This is an ideal coaching position. So that way they're diagonal. It decreased rapport, decreased distance increases rapport. They're sort of at a 45-degree angle with each other. There is no barrier. So having a corrective coaching conversation with someone across a desk is not going to serve you well. Of course, we know that listening is part of the deal as well. And sometimes our staff members say things that we don't necessarily pick up on. Here's a great example. We've been understaffed all summer and I can never seem to get to the real work. I'm just babysitting all the time. Whenever someone calls off, I have to pick up the slack. It's exhausting. So if I were coaching this person, I would have to be listening to learn and digesting aloud. So I would first start with asking some questions. Corrective coaching is going to have to happen for this person. Just based on what you're hearing here, it sounds to me like this is a person whose performance has started to drop off, and they're making excuses as to why their performance has dropped off. So I personally would be saying, okay, so tell me when you feel like the understaffing really started. Was it June or July? Because I want to start making a timeline in my own head about where perhaps this person started to feel like things were getting harder. What's the real work that you feel like you aren't able to get to right now? I can tell that you're exhausted. I can just see it in your eyes whenever I walk past you. You're not looking at me anymore. And I'm feeling like you're just unhappy. Am I getting that right? So sometimes I have to just emotion label a little bit and digest aloud what I'm actually absorbing from this person. So asking questions, listening to learn, and digesting aloud. This is going to be another thing that helps you when you have to actually share the bad news. So it looks to me as though I just got kicked out again. So what are you bringing to the table, to me, is the biggest part of it. We sometimes don't even realize that we're doing some of the things that we're actually doing. So once you have figured out, hey, you know what, I'm not listening enough and my body language isn't helping, then we go to the 7% of the words that you're using as well. There are some key words at key times, and here's a tip for you. Consider reframing what the problem is. So if we have a staff member here that's saying, oh, excuse me, we've been understaffed all summer and I can't get to the real feedback. I'm just babysitting all the time. Whenever someone calls off, I have to pick up the slack. It's exhausting. My summary comment might be that she's burning out. And instead, think of how we might reframe the negative there. She's burned out. I might say, we need to give her a break. Or it's time for us to think of how we might be able to rearrange her workload. So if I don't think about how I reframe the negative, often it just becomes more negative. So it becomes this cyclone of negative. So she's too casual with guests, perhaps. Instead, if I reframe the negative into positive, then I'm thinking of, I think we have some opportunities to provide some more verbiage, some positive professional verbiage for her that's going to benefit her in many ways. He didn't bother to learn. So instead of he didn't bother to learn, I could reframe that into saying, we haven't given him an opportunity to learn what he needed to learn. Or it's time to give him some space so he can learn what he needs to learn. Think of how you're able to perhaps reframe those negative words and phrases that you do tend to lean on a little bit more. Now, what about if somebody's defensive? It happens. I'm sure you've had to perhaps terminate people and they weren't very happy about that. And you've probably learned a few things along the way. Some reminders for you. Treat the other person with respect. They do deserve respect and dignity. And how would you feel in that situation? Of course. You will be attacked sometimes, and it's important to remember that it's not about you. It's not at all about you. Whenever you are having to provide that, hey, next time let's try this. Control your own defensiveness. Generous listening, the more you're able to listen to learn and digest aloud, is going to reduce defensiveness and maybe even create a clearing for the real conversation to happen, which may involve tears. And that's okay. We can work with that. Stay focused and be persistent in asserting your needs. It's okay for all of us managers and leaders to say, this is what I expect. This is what I need. This is important to all of us. We need this. It's okay for you to have expectations. So don't be afraid of saying that. If you want keys to coaching that staff will actually listen to, these are some of my biggest takeaways for all of you. Respect what you expect and admit it when you don't. It's all right for you to say, you know what, we have all been extremely relaxed in how we have been addressing our guests. I have done it myself where I have had a personal conversation on the floor and I know that it was within earshot of guests, and I am doing a better job of that. Can we all work together on that one, please? Ask questions. Help me understand. I really need to understand this. Be an ostentatious listener through how you ask questions and share your observations. Here's what I have been seeing. Here is what I've noticed. At this time, at this place, this is what I saw. This is what I heard. Give your feedback, please. Don't hide it or wait. If you're not going to hurt somebody, you won't hurt anybody's feelings anymore than not telling them what they need to know. Create some accountability with your feedback. That means that it's not just, hey, do this. It means, hey, do this, and I'm going to check and make sure that you did this. And provide them some activities, or here's the actionable item that I want you to take action with. And finally, just an extra tip for you. This is another thing that we've worked on in the past is share your stories. Sometimes people just don't know what's possible unless you tell them what perhaps has worked in the past. It's okay to say in corrective coaching or when you're giving negative feedback, I've screwed up as well. I've made this mistake. And here's what happened, and here's how I fixed it, and here's how I learned from that mistake. When we're more human with it, I think we go a lot further. So remember, if your staff doesn't know, they'll never grow. So here are my action items for you, and I will be following up with you in a couple of days here. Share with your staff that you're going to try something new. Pick one thing from today. If it's that you're going to reframe the negative, or if it's that you're going to listen to learn and digest aloud, or be really aware of your body language. Share what you're going to work on. Today, challenge yourself to provide praise coaching 5 times and corrective coaching 1 time. So do your 5-to-1 today. See if you can do it and see what happens. And if you think it's going to be awkward, share with your staff that you're trying something new. And tell me how it goes. I'll be looking. If I don't get a note from you in 2 days, I'm going to be reaching out to all of you in 2 days. So hopefully that's a deal, because a goal without a plan is just a wish. And I want all of you to feel really empowered and valuable when it comes to providing that corrective coaching for your staff, so the negative doesn't feel negative. So next month, our green room will be 4-star service tips and tricks on August 23rd. Please remember to tune in that day. Hopefully, if you have any service tips and tricks that you want to share, let us know, but I have quite a few for you. And I know that a lot of you have been on vacation, so please feel free to be on the lookout for when this becomes available to all of you as a recording that will become available here to you within the next 24 hours. And you can share that with your staff. And please remember that this is supposed to be participation. So in the future, if you can please have your microphones and your speakers ready to go for conversation, that's going to definitely make this a lot more valuable for all of you. So thanks for your time today, everybody. I'm glad that you were able to participate. If there's anything else that I can provide for you as it comes to corrective coaching, please don't hesitate to let me know. And I am going to stay online here for the next few minutes, and feel free to reach out to me if you have some questions or concerns.